Fall is here, and it's my favorite time of the year, where temperatures are cooling down and we can be in the yard almost all day. So I want to give you a full tour of my backyard full of fruit trees, tropicals, and other rare and interesting plants. But first, I'm Matt, and this is Touchgrass Gardening, where we talk about rare, exotic, and fun plants growing in a harsh environment. And I'm here outside of Phoenix, Arizona, where we have one of the harshest environments in the world, both heat and cold. So if you're new to this channel, first I want you to subscribe and like this video, and then I'll take you on my tour. First, I'm going to show you my tropical and more sensitive fruit tree zone. So this entire zone is very well protected by microclimate. I have an oak tree guarding the south, and I have an oleander hedge guarding the west. And the first tree I'm going to show you is this Mauritius lychee. It's about 4 years in the ground now, and it's just doing great. You can see all this new growth was just in the past couple weeks, because as the temperature starts to go down, that's when it grows. In the summer, it's just sitting dormant. But it's happy here, and you can grow lychee. I wanted to ask my audience if anyone else has a lychee tree. If you do, let me know how it's doing in the comments below. The next tree I want to show you is actually a pretty popular one for Phoenix, but it's extremely versatile, and some people struggle with it. So this is the Loquat tree. This is a golden nugget variety of Loquat. It was planted around the same time as a lychee, so about 4 years old, and it gives fruit every year. It's a very reliable producer. It's in pretty much all day filtered sun. So some people say, you need a lot of sun to produce fruit. For certain trees like Loquat, it can deal with all day filtered because it's under this oak tree, and then the oleanders to the west. So it's just very healthy, very beautiful, evergreen, lush looking fruit tree. I love Loquat. There's two small trees here, part of my experiments this year. These are Paw Paw trees. So this is something you normally don't see in my zone where it gets as hot as it does. But I planted them in the spring, and they made it through the summer. And that's what I was really worried about, is they won't make it through the summer. So this is a fruit tree that's native to North America. And this is a Paw Paw mango variety and a KSU Chappel, so two of the most vigorous varieties. And I'm hoping that we start to get fruit in the next few years, but these will probably grow slowly because they're only going to grow in our spring and fall. And you can see there's already a new leaf that just came in last week. So I'm fairly certain these are going to recover. And you can see they just got fried by the summer, even though they're in pretty much all day filtered sun. The next couple trees I'm going to talk about are ones that I just planted. These are Eugenias, so they're tropical cherries. This is a cherry of the Rio Grande, and the one next to it is a Savannah Cherry. So they're related, and they actually do quite well here if you give them enough shade. I've tried this cherry of the Rio Grande, absolutely delicious. I just don't have one for myself. It's a beautiful tree, very lush, nice and green, evergreen. Because it's a little bit cold sensitive, I put it in this area that's quite well protected. That way I probably won't have to really cover these much. Maybe I will the first year just because they just got put in the ground in the winter. But overall, you really want to protect these type of Eugenia trees. You can see now, even in the fall, this new growth. So just put it in the ground, has some nice new growth because it's fall, it's happy, temperatures are moderate, and it's a little bit humid. Now moving on to one of my favorite trees is a Longan tree. This is a Kohala Longan, and it just has a ton of new growth. It loves the spring and the fall, where it just grows like crazy. And Longan is one that actually does fruit very reliably in the Phoenix area. You might think about tropical fruits, maybe you can grow the tree, but you're not going to get any fruit. With Longan, that is not the case. This thing will fruit prolifically every year. And Kohala is the one that I recommend for people to get first to get into Longan, just because it's the most vigorous tree and it's just very beautiful. It's also the most common one that you can find at most tropical nurseries. Now moving on into my greenhouse zone. So I put a big temporary greenhouse over this area every year. I made a video about it last year, so you can click on it above and you can see that how we made the temporary greenhouse. I'm going to do the same thing again probably in a month or two. This is a soursop tree, so it will get fried in our winter because we get down to 25 degrees Fahrenheit, gets below 0 Celsius, so it's sensitive to frost, but it's just beautiful and it has a very desired fruit. I haven't seen soursop fruit in Phoenix, but I think it should be able to based on how much growth it's put on in 1 year. So I just planted this spring and it's already pretty much doubled in size. So it's happy here. So I think it'll grow well. Next to it is a rose apple. This is a green rose apple. The green varieties are supposed to be sweeter than the red varieties. This is a fruit that you don't generally see a lot of. That's why I wanted one in my yard, because I like to grow things that I can't just go to the grocery store and pick up. This is one of those type of trees. It's also kind of an experiment for me. I know it's very cold sensitive, so I have it in my greenhouse zone. But actually, I was surprised how well it took the sun. So this area kind of has sun till about 1 p.m. or so. And it got pretty blasted. There's a few leaves that are curled up, but overall it survived. And as it starts to become more developed in the soil, I think it'll be fine with almost all day sun. This tree over here is coffee. So again, in the greenhouse, it will die in our winters without protection. You can see it got pretty beat up by the sun, even though it's very well protected. It has basically no ability to take Phoenix sun at almost any hour. So a few weeks ago, I had a shade cloth all around this so that it was protected. But even then, when it got even a glimpse of the sun, it would start to get burned. And that's what you see from all that. So coffee is an experiment for me. I don't expect to be brewing my own coffee from this plant, but I saw it at a tropical store and I thought, let's just give it a try and see what happens. Next to it is one of my most successful experiments, which is jackfruit. So jackfruit is one of my favorite fruits. Whenever we see it at the Asian market, it's one that we buy right away. It's also one of the coolest looking fruits you can find, with big spikes, but it's delicious. And a lot of people might be intimidated by the fruit, but if you ever have a chance to give it a try, it's one that you should try because it's just so good. This tree almost looks kind of like a ficus, but it's a black gold jackfruit. I did some research and I saw that many people said this was the most cold hardy of the jackfruit varieties. It grows well in Australia. So I planted this, I think, 2.5 years ago. And every winter I have to kind of cut down the top a little bit because it just grows so crazy. No fruit yet, but I expect that I should see flowers within a couple of years just because it's so healthy. It's doing really well. And in the winter, I do put winter protection over it. Now on to my mangoes. So I have 3 mangoes. The first one is my struggle tree. This is called a Super Alphonso. The first year I put in the ground, it had like lots of fruit. It did really well. But 1 year it got bit pretty hard by the winter, and then it's never really recovered properly. It always gets burnt by the sun, and then it gets a little bit burnt by the winter. So it's always looking a little bit raggedy, and we had no fruit this year. But I don't want to pull it out and try again until I kind of experiment with a few things to make it recover. Behind that is a Mahachanok mango. It's one of the more prolific fruiters. I just put it in the ground this spring, so all these branches are new. It was just kind of a stick. And I'm really excited about this mango because it seems to do quite well in our harsh sun. Doesn't have any damage. And then the last mango I have is called Karen Michelle. And I put this in the ground about a year ago, and it's just put on a ton of growth. I think it should fruit this year. And the reason I chose these 3 mango varieties is because we went to a mango tasting event and I was able to try like 50 different mangoes. and these were among our favorites. We made a video on that. So if you ever want to think about how should I choose the variety of fruit tree before it's in the ground, you should watch this video. The last tree in my greenhouse zone is another experiment that I haven't seen growing in Phoenix. It's called a green sapote. So it's more of a tropical fruit, but amongst the sapotes, I've heard that it has some of the best tasting fruit there is. And as you can see, it likes it here. It likes the heat. It doesn't mind, 115 degrees Fahrenheit, but I have protected it pretty well this summer where, it didn't get any direct sun. It was all indirect sun and, sun through the layer of a shade cloth. So that's my greenhouse zone where I put up a big structure. Behind me, you can see this Aravaipa avocado. This thing doesn't need protection in the winter or the summer. It just grows prolifically. It's a massive tree, even after just 3 years in the ground. It's 20, 25 feet in height, and it's starting to really spread out. It's one of the easiest varieties of avocado that you can put in the ground, especially in Arizona, because the seedling from which it was originally found and is now grafted from was found in the Aravaipa Valley of Arizona, and so it's acclimated somewhat to our climate, even though avocados generally don't like it here. And here's another avocado. It's called Fuerte. It is one that I just bought at Home Depot, kind of on a whim, and it did very little the first 2 years it was in the ground, and then on the third year, it just exploded in growth. It gets a fair amount of sun. The first couple years, its bark turned black because it had so much damage from the sun, and I painted it, and then this year it just has really taken off. So you can see how it's protecting its bark with all these branches and leaves because it gets sun until, say, 2 p.m. each day. So it gets pretty much full sun. But obviously, as you can see, you can grow avocado here in Phoenix. I guess I should show the last avocado that I have in my yard, which is the one that's most special to me because it's a seedling avocado that I first grew during the pandemic when we were bored, and that's what got me into gardening. So these are 2 seedling avocados kind of right next to each other. I was living in California at the time in a small apartment, and I just put them in a planter. So I had like 18 avocado seeds in a little planter, just watching them grow. And when we moved to Arizona, I tried to put about 6 of them in the ground right next to each other, which wasn't smart. And several of them died off, but these are the 2 strongest ones. And now they're full-fledged trees that are 20 feet tall. So you can grow avocado seeds in Phoenix. They just need a little extra babying. Like this one is in a pretty protected area. The oleander is right next to it. So it gets sun until about 11 a.m. noon, and then the sun stops for it and it's in pretty much shade. And right now you can see just how healthy it is, all this new growth. It gets burned a little bit in the summer, but it always comes back. And I think as the years progress, it should get less burned in the summer because it'll have more roots to support it. So let's keep going in the fruit area. I can show you some of the newer ones that I've planted. This is a Chico Sapote. It's a Morena variety, and it actually flowered this year. It just didn't hold any fruit, but it's healthy. This is a really cool tree. The fruit is kind of like brown sugar, cinnamon. It's just a very delicious fruit, and they grow well in our environment as long as you winter protect it, say, in the first year. The next tree I want to show is one that's really cool. It's called a nectoplum, so a nectarine and plum hybrid. It has mostly purple growth, but our sun is so strong that it turns it green. So in the fall and winter before it defoliates, the tree will turn purple. And one of the reasons I have it is because my wife wanted more purple trees in the yard, and I ended up disappointing her again because here it is sitting here green. But we haven't had fruit off this. This is a Spice Z variety of nectar plum, and I've heard the fruit's actually really good. And it's self-fertile, so it's a pretty good tree that I think can kind of make your yard look a little bit different and still provide fruit. The one that's next to it, and the last one we'll talk about in this fruit tree section, is the Nixon Peace fig. And this fig is just the most vigorous tree I've probably ever seen. I put it in the ground about a year ago, and the trunk is already just massive, like huge tree. And I've cut it back several times, like huge branches just cut, because otherwise it's leaning 20 feet towards the sun. It's planted in kind of a poor area because next to it there's a mature tangelo tree, and it doesn't get full sun. It only gets sun from about noon on, so it's always trying to grow west. So I have to pull it east and then keep chopping it, because I also don't want a fig tree that's 40 feet tall, because then I won't get to eat any of them. So Nixon Peace is a really cool tree. It has a cool backstory. I'm sure you can look it up if you want to. I'm not going to regale you here, but this is one that I enjoy. It's a honey fig. It's really good. My family, they all love this fig. So if you're looking for a fig tree for your yard, Nixon Peace is probably one that's going to grow fast and not disappoint you. So now I'm going to show more fruit trees that are in a shadier area, because a lot of the mature trees I have in my backyard, like I have a oak tree, an ash tree, a big apricot tree, they provide a ton of shade back here. So I need trees that can fruit that aren't in full sun. And I've found that I actually find Longan to be my favorite fruit. So one of my big projects this year was finding and planting different varieties of Longan, because we already saw the Kohala Longan. Right here is a Diamond River Longan. It was a very small plant when I got it from Lara Farms, but it's actually grown a lot just in the past couple months. So I got it this fall and planted it as soon as I had it. I'll probably have to protect this winter, just for at least for the first year, because I also think that Kohala is the most vigorous variety of Longan. So the other varieties of Longan I have may not survive as well without any help. Next to it, I have a white sapote. This is a Suebel variety. It hasn't fruited yet, but I think this is one that is looking healthy, growing throughout the year, and may fruit within the next 1 to 2 years. It's also kind of branchy, because like I said, this area is a little shadier. It's pretty much all day filtered sun. Even right now you can see it's kind of in shade, and it's looking for sun. So this is a tree that wants full sun, but can't take it in its first couple of years. So if you do plant a white sapote, you're going to want to put a shade cloth over it in its first and second years, otherwise you'll fry it in the summer. Next to it is another Longan. Like I said, I planted 4 more Longans. So you'll see that this one has some nice new growth on it as well. This one is a BQ variety. You might be wondering like why you would plant multiple varieties of something. For one, you just get the different taste. I think for me it's also fun as like a collector of plants to get different varieties of your favorite fruits. But also, many fruit trees tend to ripen at slightly different times of the year, depending on their variety. So if you really love a fruit and you plant multiple different varieties of that tree, you should be able to eat it for months at a time, because they likely will not all ripen at the same time if they're different varieties. Next to it is this Indian jujube. This is a tropical jujube, so it does have a little bit of cold sensitivity, but now it's so tall I'm probably just going to leave it. It's a pretty vigorous grower, even though it grows in kind of strange ways. Even if you see a mature Indian jujube, it's kind of weird, branchy, falling over on itself. So it's one you kind of have to trim a fair amount or stake. So I'm probably going to restake this and try to straighten it out in the next week or two. But it loves sun. This is a full sun tree, and I think it's even better than Chinese jujubes because it's almost like a juicier, sweeter version of a Chinese jujube, and this is generally referred to as an Indian or green jujube. Behind it, I have another longan. This is called a fortune eye. It has some nice new growth on it already. Longans just love the fall in Phoenix because it's the perfect temperature range, and it is a little more humid. So we have storms rolling in over the past couple weeks, and all the longans have just started going and exploding in growth. So it's been fun to see because I just planted these. This is one of my older longans. This is actually a purple longan. It's also one of those trees that in the winter, it is purple, but the sun actually changes its leaves green because the sun is so strong. And this one does get a little more sun than some of my other sensitive tropicals. You can see it has fruit that's holding on. This is the first time it's fruited. The second time that it's flowered, it's been in the ground about 2.5, 3 years, I think. And it should hold that fruit because my Kohala, when it actually had fruit on it, it held to maturity. So I'm really excited. The purple longan is kind of one that you see online. It's like, you know, you type in purple mango or purple longan, it's probably like an altered image of that fruit to look really spectacular. So I'm kind of curious what this actually turns out to be, because purple longan is something that is kind of rare. And so we'll see, maybe make a video on what this fruit tastes like, so stay tuned. The last in my series of longans is this Sri Champo longan. It was basically on death's door when I bought it from Seamus O'Leary earlier this year. But it's putting on new growth. It still doesn't look super healthy, but it does have new growth, so I think it'll come back. But we'll see how it does in the winter. It might struggle. I'll probably put a little heat lamp under here just to give it some extra help because the tree looks pretty weak. Now, the opposite of a weak tree is a mulberry tree. This is a white mulberry, sometimes referred to as green mulberry. I love this because it's very different tasting than pretty much every other type of mulberry that has purple fruit. This one has more of a green-white fruit, and it has more of a honey taste. It's also delicious, just like a mulberry, but it can kind of give you a bit more variety if you have multiple mulberries, or you have a friend with a mulberry who has too much every year. You might want to put a white mulberry in the ground. This tree is only 1.5 years old, and I had to top it already. I had to cut the sides of it because it's just like 15 feet by 20 feet already, and it just keeps going. So mulberry is one that, if you don't have the room for it, and you're not going to be out there chopping every day, you may want to think about planting a dwarf variety, because this one is just insanely vigorous. It loves the heat, can take full sun, and it'll fruit every year. So mulberry, we put a video out about mulberry, kind of the pros and cons, also the easiest fruit trees in Arizona to grow. This is, I think, number 1 or 2. So you can watch that video here and learn more about mulberry. I guess I can do this now. This is a magnolia. This is called a St. Mary magnolia. It has big, nice white flowers. It has some nice new growth here now. It was kind of stunted, just sat here for a while, but it is a pretty tree when it does bloom. But the thing about magnolia in Phoenix is that when it does bloom, if any of those blooms touch the sun, they instantly will start falling. So when this blooms, it has blooms for about 1 or 2 days. I really love the glossy leaves. Magnolia is a beautiful tree, but unless you're here watching those blooms for those 2 days, it kind of might feel like a waste to plant a magnolia, but at least you can see it here and appreciate when I take a picture of the blooms. So I'm gonna move on and show you some of my other trees that are here before we talk about citrus. This is a rainbow eucalyptus. We did a video on this not too long ago, which you'll see linked above. This is probably my top 5 favorite trees that are out there. just because it has such a cool variety of colors on the bark. And it grows pretty fast, rather vigorous. Like I said, you can find more details in my video, and you'll find out why it's really one of my favorite trees. It's somewhat rare to see in Phoenix because it does take a lot of water. It is sensitive to the cold, but it can take our sun, just like most eucalyptus trees. So that's the rainbow eucalyptus. Right over here in front of it, I have another white sapote. This is called a Vernon white sapote. It has a fruit on it that I think is near ready. I probably should have cut the fruit off it just to let it grow more, but I've started to take the philosophy of whatever the tree wants to do, I'm kind of just going to let it, unless it's like going to kill itself. So white sapote is one that is really delicious. Within the next couple of years, I'll probably have 2 mini white sapotes. But for now, I really love evergreen fruit trees, and this is one that is one of the best there is that you can plant and have fruit with in Phoenix, Arizona. Behind it, I have another mulberry. This is a Pakistan mulberry, probably the most widely known of the mulberries. It's just a very like classic mulberry flavor. Fruits prolifically every year, but again, grows insanely fast and gets 30 feet tall in one season. Because I had cut it down to about 8 feet, and now it's 30 feet tall. I cut the side branches. It looks different than the white mulberry that I just showed you, because the side branches were hitting other trees and I couldn't even walk in my yard. But the nice thing about mulberry is you can hack away at this tree and it doesn't care. It doesn't get unhappy. It just keeps growing. So again, Pakistan mulberry. Right here is the tree that I planted most recently, just this week actually. It's called a Tetsui hybrid pear. And when I got it, the leaves were all black and curled up. And I was like, oh, I got a dud. And I'll put it in the ground anyway. I reached out to the grower and he's like, it should come back. I think it's just heat damage from the packaging, because they sent it from the East Coast. I think somewhere in Tennessee, something like that. And after I put it in the ground for a week, you can see it's got new growth here near the top. So it's coming back. And I think that the tree will do fine. I saw on one of my favorite YouTube gardening channels, Enlightenment Garden, that she recommends this pear tree as her favorite in the Phoenix area because the fruit is quite big and it holds even with our summers. So that kind of concludes. Oh, I have one more fig tree. This is a black Madeira fig. It's one of the more famous fig varieties, and it's different than the honey variety that we showed you with the Nixon Peace. This one is more of like that dark purple jammy type of fig. And it's also one that's kind of in a weird area, because this area of my yard, the soil is super compacted and it doesn't really get that much sun. So I needed something that was pretty vigorous and would grow up and find the sun. So that's why I put a fig tree here. I guess the last tree I'll talk about is this Australian bottle tree that also provides a lot of shade and microclimate. I really love Australian bottle tree. It was here when I moved into the house, and it's just continued to grow. It has kind of these weeping branches, evergreen, can take our full sun. It's just a really cool tree. You sometimes see it on the street corners in Phoenix, much more rare than other things like sisu or Chinese elm or Palo Verde or mesquite. But you will sometimes see this tree. But I think it's one that's kind of a nice staple microclimate tree to put in your yard. So the next area I want to share is my citrus and full sun fruit tree area. So behind me, you can see this Arizona sweet orange tree. So they're basically just oranges. The variety is called Arizona sweet. You can slice them up, eat them like a normal orange, but I think they're really great for juicing. So we just juice for like 3 months straight from December, January, February with this tree and several others that I have. So Arizona Sweet is awesome. It also has a little bit thicker rind, so it can take our kind of harsher Arizona sun. I think that's why they decided to go with Arizona Sweet. Right next to it, I have a Tangelo tree. This is a Mineola Tangelo. Actually, in our first citrus episode, which you can watch up here, I didn't know the variety of this tree. It was here when I moved in, and some YouTube commenters helped me identify that this is Mineola because of the little kind of knob on top and then the bell shape of it. So it's a really cool tree. We always have way too many Tangelos. Try to give away as many as we can. The tree is huge. It's the biggest citrus in my yard. It's like 30 feet tall and way too much fruit, but it's delicious. The one next to it is called Oro Blanco. It's a grapefruit and pomelo hybrid, and it puts off some pretty big fruits. So not quite as big as a pomelo, but bigger than a grapefruit. And it has this white flesh that doesn't have the negative aspects of grapefruit, but also has the sweetness of like a really good pomelo. So this is actually my wife's favorite citrus. She just loves Oro Blanco. If you've never tried one, maybe go to a citrus tasting event. They're just awesome. Highly recommend this tree. And there's, I think, 5 or 6 fruit on there this year. Now that the tree is finally about 6 feet tall, it's starting to put off fruit, which is great. One that I missed in the last section, this is also full sun, so it kind of counts here too, is apricot. This is a Kerry apricot. One thing about this variety that I really like is it's the earliest to put on fruit and fruit to ripen because our summers get so hot. This fruit is ready in May and it's just totally full. The birds get a lot of them, but still if I just come under the tree and I shake the tree, there's enough that fall down that I can, eat a dozen a day when they're ripe. And this has been a pretty easy tree. No real maintenance, and it's just very prolific, so apricot. Next to it is a Chandler pomelo. This is one that has struggled a little bit. Mostly I think it was my fault because I planted it too low. When I planted it, I think the bottom of the box kind of fell out or something, and then it ended up being too low. I was busy and then I never corrected it, and now I'm at the point that I'm not going to correct it. So for a while it did struggle, but now you can see that it's fruiting and there's a ton of new growth on the top. So I'm hoping that the tree will just sort of be resigned to its position and start to do well, and I think it will. Chandler pomelo is the classic red pomelo, sweet, nice, and as you'll find out, as we have 2 more pomelo trees, I love pomelo. My family loves pomelo. I think it's the citrus that is probably the most underrated of all. Next to this tree is a pomegranate tree. Pomegranates are also pretty underrated in Phoenix if you actually take care of them. They just give off super delicious fruit. This is a red wonderful variety, so one of the classic types, pretty similar to what you can buy in the store. But there's probably 15, 20 fruits on this tree. I made a couple videos about pomegranate. When do you pick it? Why isn't it sweet? And then how to protect it. You can see I put these organzo bags on here. I do this in the middle of summer, and it protects against something called a leaf-footed bug. And that's this type of bug that kind of sits on there and just sucks all the juice out, and it really ruins the fruit. But if you put these bags on, no problems at all. Super easy tree, full sun, barely takes any water, and still puts off really fun, exotic type of fruit. The next citrus tree I have here is another Arizona Sweet. Very similar to the last one, about the same size. Was here when we moved in, and it's just awesome for juicing. I love having multiple of orange trees because if you are gonna juice, like, you go through a lot of fruit, and it's also a fun activity for me and my kids where, like, we just come out and pick fruit and then go inside and juice. So if you're thinking about, I only need 1 orange tree, like I only need 1 lemon or 1 lime, which is true, you could use more than 1 orange. On to the next citrus. is a Valentine pomelo. So this is, when I was doing my research on what are the best tasting pomelos, the three that came up were Chandler, Tahitian, and Valentine. And so this one is one that on the inside, when you cut it open, it has sort of a heart shape to it. And that's how it got its name as Valentine. Back here, you'll see that this one is the Tahitian. I actually planted it at the same time as the Valentine, but it is about double the size. It has fruit on it as well. It's just one of those that, it's in a strange spot. It doesn't get all day sun, which is what citrus wants. So it's kind of branchy, growing out in different directions as opposed to straight up. And that's what will happen when you put a full sun tree not in full sun. But you can still do it. It's just not ideal. And you can see that it's already fruiting, even though it's only been in the ground for about a year and a half, 2 years. So now I'm going to shift to another area of my yard where I have more citrus trees, and we'll talk about those there in my sitting area in my backyard. So now we're in a sitting area next to my house, and I want to show you my kumquats and a couple other citrus trees that I have here. This is a Nagami kumquat. It's actually a pretty hardy citrus. It can take even more cold than the oranges that I showed you. It's a smaller fruit, a little bit more sour. Some of them are a little tart, but some people like to eat them straight. Like my daughter will pick these up and just eat them straight. I don't like that, but you can put drinks or make drinks with them. Also as like kind of a garnish on the side. And the main reason I planted these here is just because it's a beautiful evergreen tree. I kind of wanted a wall of evergreen, nice trees here that had fruits on them. So a little bit later in the year, this will be nice and green. These will be turning yellow-orange. It's just really quite beautiful. So this is the first kumquat tree, which is the Nagami. Between the kumquats, I have a Buddha's hand. This is also one of those that's more of like a garnish. You can use it as a zest, a spice. It's also like just one of those that looks cool. Like I said with this area, I just wanted to kind of be sitting here and just looking at things and enjoying the uniqueness of it. So that's why I planted this Buddha's hand. It's pretty easy. I thought it was gonna be more cold sensitive. I at least read that online before I planted it, and I was going to cold protect it. One night I forgot when it was really cold. It was like 28 degrees Fahrenheit, and it had 0 damage. So after that, I never cold protected it again, and it was fine. So this is Buddha's hand citrus. Next to it is another kumquat. This is a Fukushu variety. It also kind of has these type of smaller fruits, just like the Nagami. Fukushu, it's a beautiful tree, very nice. I'm not a huge fan of the fruit. I think these are the most tart of the 3 kumquats I have. But again, if you're just looking for that beautiful sort of smaller type of citrus tree that's evergreen, cool looking fruit all year, I think Fukushu grows well. The last kumquat variety I want to show you is my favorite one, and that's called Meiwa. It's right here. It is the only one that I feel like I could potentially just pick it off the tree and eat it, because it's very sweet, very mild compared to the other ones. So if you only have space for one, I would definitely plant Meiwa. It's kind of in a strange position. When I moved in, there was a bush here that died, and I was like, I want a fruit tree instead. So I put it here. Right next to it is another Arizona sweet orange, and it's grown quite a lot in the past 4 years since we moved into this house, and it's kind of overtaking it. So I always have this little like wedge in here where I try to give it enough sunlight to fruit, but then have a big orange tree behind it. But it doesn't seem to mind so far. It's doing exactly what I want it to. Evergreen and showing, the fruit, and it's delicious. So this is the Meiwa kumquat. You've seen a few Arizona sweet oranges already. This is another one. This is not on my flood irrigation, it's just on drip irrigation. So this area is just drip, and it's doing fine. Maybe grows a little bit slower and has a little bit less fruit than the irrigated ones, but I think there's still a ton of fruit on this tree, and it's very healthy, even though it's just sitting in a bunch of rocks. Citrus is a hardy tree. I have another one right next to it. This is another Arizona sweet. This was also planted by the previous owner. A lot of fruit on it as well. Great tree. Next to it is a key lime. So a lime tree, I think anyone who lives in Arizona or a desert type area should have a lime tree. They're so easy, and they have fruit for most of the year. So you can come out, pick a lime, use it for cooking, for drinks, whatever you want to use it for, and they'll usually be on the tree. If not, you can hold them for a few weeks on a table and they stay. But this tree is one of my favorites in my yard just because it's so useful. The interesting thing about this tree is actually that it was a cocktail tree. And so there's two sides of it. It kind of goes out like this. And the original owner told me that it's a lemon and a lime cocktail. But as I've found, these lemons over here, they're not good. They taste bad. And they're super thorny. So I was trying to figure out, trying all these different lemon varieties to compare them with. None of the known varieties taste like this one does. So what I've concluded is that I have key lime going this way and some kind of rootstock going this way. But because it does provide shade in this area of the yard, I just keep it because it's still like a beautiful, nice evergreen citrus tree. So those are my citrus trees in the sitting area. So now I want to talk about one of my favorite areas of the yard. And a lot of this was built already before we came in, but I've added sort of my own personal touch to it with the trees that I've planted. And that's this sitting area, so outdoor dining. And you'll see right when you walk by, you'll see this kind of wall of green. It used to just be a wall of wooden boards, which some people might like, but I really like sort of the alive look. And you can see this is a passion fruit vine. I planted 2 of them behind this fence, and they've just done great. They've been here about 3 years. We don't get that much fruit. I'd say a handful each year, as long as we hand pollinate them, because it's not in full sun. Like passion fruit wants more sun than what is here, because you'll see if you look up where we are right now, there are 3 big Fantax ash trees providing the shade for this area. So even when it's the summer, we can come out and have a lunch or have a coffee and sit in this area because of how shaded it is. And that also provides the protection that I can plant different things in here. One of those, which arguably could do with more sun, is this starfruit. This is a Kerry variety of starfruit. It still doesn't put on fruit, I think possibly just because it's young, but also because it doesn't get enough sun. But it's just a beautiful tree. Like starfruit is one of the most beautiful trees. It's very sensitive to wind. So if you have a huge windstorm where you plant this on a border where there's nothing on the other side, like this tree will get beat up and maybe die. Just because anytime there's wind, it just has leaves that kind of crinkle up and fall down. And that's why one of the reasons I planted it here in a pot is because it's so protected from everything. One of the trees I put in recently is something called a sweet tea olive. I had planted this in a little bit more sun when we first moved in. It was just morning sun, and it died. This tree is not supposed to grow here. But when I visited my father-in-law in China and saw his garden, which we made a video about, which you can click on here so you can see a Chinese garden, one of my favorite trees was this sweet tea olive. And my wife just loves the smell of this flower. So I was like, oh, can I find it in the States? And I did, I found it, and I was like, I need to put it in an area that's pretty shady and has a little bit of filtered sun and maybe has sun in the winter. And this area is perfect because ash trees lose their leaves in the winter. So this gets sun in the winter and then it's shaded in the summer. It's not gonna grow as fast as it would in its native environment, but it will grow because I saw it grow already in the springtime. So this is a sweet tea olive. Next to it is another tree that I kind of recently planted. I think it was this spring. This is a lychee, an emperor variety, just in a pot. My other one that you saw earlier in the video is in the ground. And I'm surprised how well this has done. It hasn't really had much leaf burn, and it's put on a lot of new growth just in the short time this year. And it seems to like the area. It does get a little bit of a blast of western sun from like 5 to 6 p.m. And there were other trees I was thinking about putting here that were shade tolerant, but lychee can actually take some sun. So I thought I could take it, and it was actually the right choice in putting this lychee tree here. I don't really expect fruit from it, but it's a very tropical, lush look that you don't often see in Phoenix. Here I have two different varieties of jasmine. This is kind of the classic jasmine that you see everywhere. And then this one is the Arabian jasmine. And we made a video about jasmine. Specifically, you can click on it here and have more of a deep dive on it. But jasmine is an awesome plant for Phoenix because it grows well in the sun. You can also train it to go all over the place, however you want it to grow. I have kind of a trellis here against this Italian cypress. Then I have it starting to grow. I just did this a few weeks ago along our LED lights or hanging lights that go throughout this area that we kind of sit in and enjoy at night too. So jasmine is a super cool plant for that. One tree that I also planted after my China trip is something called a loropetalum. This is one that also probably shouldn't be growing here, but it was in my father-in-law's garden, and I was like, that's so cool. And it has like cool blooms. It had a nice trunk shape. It had purple flowers, which obviously we want more of. So I wanted to try to plant it. I planted this one in, I think, last fall, and it has done pretty well. It got beat up a little bit in the summer because there's about half an hour to 45 minutes where it gets full sun, where this ash tree and cypress doesn't cover. So it does get a little burned, but I think as these trees continue to grow and as this fully develops roots in the pot, it will survive and actually thrive in this area. So loropetalum is one of those you should look up and think about if you have kind of a shady area, because it's doing well in my shade. So this is our seating area. Just wanted to share it with you because it's one of my favorite areas in the whole yard. So now we're going to move on to the borders of my yard, which, if you think about how I planned my yard, I want to be able to walk through the yard where the trees are planted, most of them in the actual central yard. And on the borders of the yard, I want it to be so thick that I can't walk through it and I can't see through it. So it just looks like a kind of a wall of green all around my property. That's the philosophy anyway. So if you see how thickly, densely these are planted, that's why. The first fruit tree we have here is another star fruit. It is a variety called, I think it was Sri Kambogan. And it is doing decently. I can see a couple blooms down there. So it's healthy enough to bloom. And it has some new growth on it, but because this is on the border, it doesn't have something right in front of it to protect against the wind. It does get beat up every now and then. It also gets attacked by this passion fruit vine. So I have to come out here and kind of pull these little things that try to strangle it off of the tree every now and then. And it's very shaded in this area, so the tree probably wants a little more sun. And you'll notice across most of my border area in my yard, I have different types of nandina. We have an entire episode on nandina, which I'll link above. If you're into it, I love nandina. It's one of those plants that adds all sorts of different colors in your yard, where in Phoenix, it's kind of hard to find those different colors, but nandina can still provide it. So that's why I kind of plant it in front of all the trees. So it's kind of this like columned look as I get to the border of my yard with color and then green. So next to it is a frankincense tree. This is one I always wanted. It is a pretty rare tree, expensive, one that grows slowly. It also probably wants more room than what I gave it, but this is a pretty sheltered area because it's under the ash tree. It is a little bit cold sensitive, so I'm worried about the winter. I'll probably cover it. I don't think I'll put a heat lamp, but this is a really cool tree, kind of a talking piece. It's right next to my sitting area, so you know, you can show people this kind of rare, fun tree. You know, frankincense, golden myrrh, everyone knows that. So it's one of those special things to put in your yard. Next to it, I have a bamboo, and it's also a kind of a special one. It's called Bambusa delicamarthara, I think. Blue. Blue is at the end of it. It's a blue bamboo. And so when the columns start getting thicker, there'll be kind of this nice pale blue look to it. And bamboo is also something that you'll see that I put all around the barrier edge of my yard because it provides so much privacy and it stays evergreen throughout the seasons. Next to it, because this is the border section, I didn't include it earlier, but this is a citrus. This is a blood orange. And it's done really well. Citrus is a great privacy hedge, and I think it should be used more than it is because you see a lot of like ficus, oleander, hopseed, but like citrus is something that is dense enough where it does provide privacy and is really nice. Right next to it, I have this white bird of paradise. So this is sometimes referred to as a giant bird of paradise as opposed to the tropical bird of paradise. These have big white flowers. I have one in my front yard as well, which did flower this year. This one has never flowered, but it looks healthy. It's pretty thick, so it provides that privacy hedge I'm looking for. Behind it is a variegated calamandan. So you can kind of see how cool these fruits look. Just very beautiful fruit. They're a little bit sour. It kind of reminds me of a floral kumquat. But it's one of those that you can also just kind of put in drinks or kind of use for different purposes other than eating right off the tree. But it's one that, you know, I saw this tree at Costco. It was $29.99. Pretty rare tree for that price. And I was like, I'll just buy it and put it in the ground. This isn't an ideal place for it, but I don't really have many ideal places left in my yard. And as you see, there's also 4 climbing roses along my fence line. And we're gonna do a video on climbing roses when they're in bloom. But roses are really, really fun to have in Phoenix because they bloom a lot, just like continuous blooms, where a lot of fruit trees, they'll bloom like once a year. Roses have a lot of blooming, and when they bloom, they just keep blooming. And that's why I like it. It also provides that color, that uniqueness, and my wife loves roses, so we have a lot of roses in the yard. As you can see, you can see kind of the color I was talking about with this Nandina. I think this one is called Obsession. Just really beautiful color on Nandina. And as the fall progresses and you get into the winter, that's when the color really comes out, is when it gets colder. Like this Nandina here is called Firepower. This turns like bright red in the winter. Behind it is something called a fishtail palm. This is one that I actually found in an indoor section of a nursery. And I was like, I wonder if I can just put that outdoor in the ground. Because I thought it was so cool looking. You know, the leaves are kind of like a fish's tail. And it's not something that you normally see in Phoenix. Sometimes you'll see this in like the lobbies of hotels. And I've never seen it in the ground. But it survived the first winter already. So my biggest fear was that it was too cold sensitive. It doesn't mind. And it's doing well. It's probably has too much shade because it's right under this ash tree, but it's still growing. Like all this growth, a lot of it's new. So it doesn't seem to mind that much, even being planted in mostly shade. As I forgot, I have a dragon fruit behind here. This dragon fruit, I'm trying to trellis onto the tree, which my trellis has kind of failed here. I'm just sort of using strings right now. And the idea for this is that instead of like having to build like a wooden trellis, you could just use the natural shape of your mature trees to have the dragon fruit kind of come around and fall over, because dragon fruit really does need a trellis to fruit and to really be healthy. So a lot of people have these structures that I think are kind of ugly to grow dragon fruit. But I thought, and this is actually an idea that I got from visiting the Huntington Garden in Los Angeles, is they would have their dragon fruit growing like this and then just being kind of naturally falling over onto the first limbs of a big mature tree. So I have several dragon fruit varieties that I planted this year that I'm trying to do that with. So there's two more trees on this border area. This is a jaboticaba. It's a sabara, so it's the most common black variety of jaboticaba. This one has kind of been through the ringer. It has lost most of its leaves. It turned brown. It looked really unhealthy for a while. And now this year it is looking great. And I attribute that mostly to me adding copious amounts of sulfur to the ground, because this thing just loves low pH. And once I did that, it just has a lot of new growth, looking green, and is happy again. So if you have a jaboticaba and you're like, why isn't it doing well? I think the main reason might be because your pH isn't quite right. Next to it, the last tree that I have in this part of the border of my yard, kind of the east-west border on the east side, is a type of mulberry called suhosan. So I saw this online and it has like really cool orange-red berries on it. And I was like, what is that? And I thought, I'll just order it and see if it grows here. And it has. It's been in the ground for over a year, so summer and winter. It's survived just fine. And the little berries, they don't look like big, long mulberries like the other trees that I have. They're kind of just like small little orange berries. And I wasn't able to try any before the birds got them all this year. But for a few days, you could see kind of these bright orange little buds all up and down the branches, which was really cool. I think next year, maybe I'll throw a tarp over it for those few days as it gets ripe, and then I'll be able to try this suhosan mulberry fruit. So as you keep walking, you can see where we were before with the fig and the Pakistan mulberry. I just have a big hedge of oleander here. This is what the previous owner of the house had put in. I don't mind oleander. We actually made a video about types of plants that most people hate, and oleander was one of those. And the second half of the title was "But Plants I Love." So most people hate oleander, but I love it because it actually puts on a lot of really pretty flowers, and it's very prolific in its blooming. So this is like a nice pink flower that just throughout the whole year is blooming. And it's a dense hedge. It's just a little bit annoying to trim, and you have to be careful because it's slightly poisonous, but as a functional hedge, it's great. And then that oleander hedge stops right here, and I just have like a very densely packed area of guavas, jujubes, and goji berries. So this is one that I just planted this year. It's called a red Malaysian guava. It was from Tropica Mango Nursery. It had kind of like almost like a purple leaf when I bought it. Again, another plant that has turned green in the summer, but I expect that it'll kind of get this darker purple again in the winter. I'm most worried about the winter with this one because it is probably pretty cold sensitive since it's from Malaysia. Next to it, behind it, is another guava that I just planted called Barbie Pink. And I heard that this is one of the best tasting guavas there is. It has a beautiful pink color. And I was finally able to find it in stock at a nursery I like. So I got this Barbie Pink. Next to it, you'll see goji berries. These goji berries really do fruit throughout the year. I don't mind them. My wife and daughter love goji berries, and they're just like constantly growing. So they're a great plant to have for summer. You can see back there, it's just, one thing I don't like about it is it's always falling over on itself, so it's kind of spreading itself out, kind of dropping seeds and trying to grow in other areas. But it is one that is pretty nice to have for, like, you know, soups and other snacks that you can make from goji berries. So I like having it. You just maybe should try them yourself before you plant it, because you might regret planting it if you really don't like it. The next guava I'll show you here is called a Beaumont Red. It's one of the more known varieties of guava. It hasn't fruited yet, but I just planted it this year, and we'll see how it does. The reason I have these guava, and then you'll see all these jujubes that I'll talk about next, is that these jujubes will lose their leaves in the winter, and then the guavas will be evergreen. So I really want this to be a hedge, and so even after the jujubes, which are taller, will lose their leaves, there'll still be some privacy here from the guavas. And I have, I think it's 7 jujubes here on this hedge. This is a honey jar jujube that we just planted this year. I actually just made a video about jujubes. So if you really want to have a deep dive on jujubes, I'm not going to talk about all of them here, but we just made a video. I'll link it above. It's one of my favorite fruits that you can grow prolifically in a desert. Super easy. And if you're a beginning gardener, jujube is probably one of the trees I would recommend for you. So you can see all these jujubes that I have here. They're pretty densely planted. It's one of those trees that doesn't really grow out. It likes to grow up. So you can plant them quite densely. Among all these jujubes, I have pineapple guavas as well. There's 3 of them. Strangely enough, this has been here for 3 years. It hasn't fruited until this year. And then when it did fruit, the fruits suddenly, I don't know if they dried up or stopped growing or what's going on, but they're so small. I expected them to be bigger, and we haven't tried eating it yet, but I don't think it's going to be edible. But the cool thing about pineapple guava is you can eat the flowers. So even if you can't get it to fruit, when it flowers, you can eat the petals, and they're actually quite delicious. And here is a perfect jujube that I'm going to pick before the birds get it. So you can see this jujube here. This is the second crop of jujube, which is always in the first part of October. And the first crop was about a month ago. So you get 2 crops of jujubes, which is another big plus. This kind of dead looking twig here is a black goji berry. And during the summer, it always goes kind of dead looking. And then in the winter, it comes back and looks alive. So I'm not really sure what to make of this. I bought this also kind of on a whim, just because we like goji berries, and I'd never seen a black goji berry, so I wanted to try it, but it doesn't seem particularly happy here because it still hasn't fruited, but it's something different that I didn't even know existed before I saw it. Just more jujubes here. Another jujube here, a Chico jujube. And then the last thing I'll show you before we go into the back border is my last guava, which is a Mexican cream. It's actually my favorite guava. It is very vigorous. The fruit is huge. And as the name says, it's quite creamy. We have 3 fruits on this tree this year, even though I planted it only a year ago. So it fruits quite fast. And it's so good. I never really thought I would enjoy a guava just fresh, straight off the tree with nothing else, but I could just slice that fruit up and eat it, which surprised me. So Mexican cream guava, beautiful tree, excellent fruit. And the next section, we'll talk about the back side border of my yard. So now I want to talk about the back border of my yard, the south and north border that's furthest from my house. And is one that I really try to have some privacy with because I have a horse trail behind me where people walk. The first thing you'll see here is a Texas sage bush. This was here when I moved in. Really pretty flowers, and when it is flowering, it has a ton of flowers. It also is evergreen, so it's a good thing to have as a privacy hedge that's super low maintenance. So Texas sagebush. Next to it, I have a jaboticaba, a white jaboticaba. This is one I planted, I think, maybe a year and a half ago. It's done all right, hasn't fruited yet, but continues to put on new growth. So I think it's reasonably happy. Behind this, you'll see that I have a lot of bamboo on the far side of my yard. Back here you have something called Timor Black. So the bamboo is nice and black. There's a new shoot coming down here, and it's one of those that hasn't been super vigorous, but still stays evergreen. It loses some leaves in the winter. I'm not sure I'd plant this one again, just because it isn't the most vigorous grower where I live. One that I do really like here is this dwarf Buddha belly. And you can see, if you look down here, the culms themselves kind of have these like fat little bellies on the bottom. And that's how it got the name dwarf Buddha belly. But this one is super thick. Like each year you kind of have to thin it out a little bit. Otherwise it just is so thick it can't even get any sunlight to grow. Next to that, I have some of my favorite Nandina. This one, I wasn't sure about it when I planted it, but it's probably my favorite. It's called Flirt, and it's just like pink and green almost all year long. So for whatever reason, this one likes this area and likes to be multicolored, even though it's planted right next to a giant vigorous tree called Silk Floss. And this is one of my favorite trees in the whole yard. I talk about this tree a lot. Full of spikes, huge tree. This is only about 4 years old in the ground, and it's already 30 feet tall. In a month or two, it's going to lose a lot of its leaves and then just be covered in pink blooms. Some of the most beautiful flowers in the world. So if you want to see this tree bloom, make sure you're subscribed, and I'm sure we'll make a video about that. Next to the silk floss is one of the more vigorous bamboos that I have. It's called a Chinese dwarf. I don't know why they call it dwarf, because it's huge and it grows fast. So it's one that I've had to trim a fair amount just because it's going everywhere and running into my other trees. So I was kind of hoping this would be more dwarf, kind of like the dwarf Buddha belly. But this one is one that kind of grows pretty high. At least it's beautiful. If it was ugly, then it'd be a different conversation, but it's a very nice bamboo, even though it's a fair amount of work for me because of where I planted it. Right here is a jaboticaba. It's a red jaboticaba. It's been in the ground about 3 years. It's still putting on new growth every year. I'd say it's not super happy, but it still is alive, which what I've learned from my other jaboticabas is they'll go through different phases, and eventually I think I can get it to a point where it's happy again. Behind that, this is a dwarf Malaysian variegated bamboo. It's supposed to be like a 6-7 foot tall bush. It's been in the ground about 3 years, and it's still only 2 feet tall. So it doesn't get a lot of sun. That's probably why. Pretty disappointing, but this Chinese dwarf bamboo can come over and give me some privacy where this one was supposed to be. And if you want to really learn a lot more about bamboo, I made a video specifically about bamboo, which I can link above, and you can have more of a deep dive into the bamboo that's in my yard. This is more Nandina. I think this one was called Lemon Lime. There's a ash tree here. This is a Fantex ash. Nice tree. Provides some nice color in the fall. Behind it is something new I just planted. It's called Angel's Trumpet. So the whole tree is poisonous, and it has these type of flowers that are just like huge and pointing down and really beautiful. So it is one of those that's a little bit cold sensitive, so I'm worried it's going to die in the winter, but it was pretty cheap when I found it and very thick. They kind of grow them from cuttings. So I thought I'll just give it a try and see how it either lives or dies in our climate. Right in front of it, you can see I'm also trying to, with another dragon fruit, trellis it on this tree. And I think like a tree like this is a perfect trellis for dragon fruit, I think. And also an ash tree is great because again, it loses its leaves, and then this can kind of grow more in those kind of winter, spring seasons. Right here is another Jaboticaba. This is called Taiwan Tiger. Last year when I planted it, it just grew like crazy. And this year it hasn't grown at all. So I'm really not sure what's going on. I think it's very possible that the oak tree or the ash tree has its roots in here already. You can kind of see there's these suckers from the oak tree that are nearby. So I'm thinking it probably has another tree's roots in there already, which might spell doom for this tree. But I'm still gonna kind of leave it and see if it comes back at some point, maybe next spring. Behind this Taiwan Tiger is two of my favorite plants. These are called lady palms. These are also things you'll often see in like indoor areas of a nursery or hotels, things like that. And I thought, well, can I plant it outside? I don't know. And it's been a huge success because it's evergreen, it's beautiful, and it grows well in shade. So under these two big mature trees, I needed something that would be evergreen. And these lady palms have done awesome. Some of my favorite trees right here. Again, I have some more Nandina here. I think this one was called like Pink Twilight. Behind that, you'll see a couple things. I have a dragon fruit that is not growing. I think because it just gets way too much shade. So it's just been sitting there since spring, hasn't done anything. So I don't know. I may have to move it just because this is almost like complete shade in this area. This is called a devil's trumpet. So at the same time I saw the angel's trumpet, a different nursery I went to suddenly had a devil's trumpet. So I thought it would be kind of cool to, behind the two mature trees in my backyard, to plant an angel's trumpet and then a devil's trumpet behind them and kind of have them block the fence a little more. It has really beautiful flowers that stick up. I've seen them growing in certain people's yards on Facebook in Phoenix, so I know it's possible to grow this plant. I just don't know if it'll grow well in this much shade, but we'll find out. Next to all that is a hedge of Nandina domestica. So most of the Nandinas you've seen so far are different varieties, like sub-varieties that have been made, but this is the traditional, most common Nandina domestica in these 5 plants here. The reason I put it here is because it's right under the oak tree, and these are purported to grow well in shade, and they've done decently. They still like a little bit of sun, but they're very beautiful because they have these berries that turn red, and around Christmas time, just has a very Christmassy look, like nice green and then the red berries. Another plant that has those type of beautiful berries is this Pyracanthia. I think the variety is Graeber's Pyracanthia, and it is a nice little like trailing vine that also has these little berries that turn red around Christmas time. So you often see this plant in nurseries around Christmas because they try to sell it when it's full of those red berries. And it's like, oh, I'm gonna put this in my yard and it'll be so festive. But it actually is a pretty cool vine that stays evergreen and provides more privacy hedge that I can have in this area. And it does well in shade. Another plant that is relatively new to my yard is this black guaparetti. It's related to Jaboticaba and is from South America. It is kind of struggling. It kind of goes through these flushes of new growth. Like I can see a little bit of new growth here. There's some leaves that look nice, but there's a lot of leaves that look pretty bad. So we'll see how it does. This is also one of my experiments. It's also very close to this oak tree that has very aggressive roots. So it's possible the oak tree's roots are in there as well. A couple more Nandinas, and then I have a starfruit. This one I believe is an Arkan starfruit. I wanted a starfruit that would be in the ground and also get a little bit more sun. My original idea was that this would have more sun, but I've now had more plants planted next to it. It gets a little bit less sun. But in the winter, it'll get more sun because the apricot will lose its leaves, and that's on the south side of it. So another starfruit. Starfruit is one of my favorite fruits. We made a video on it. If you want to see how a truly loaded starfruit tree looks, I made a video in my neighbor's yard, and he has one of the best starfruits I've ever had. Next to the starfruit are two pomegranates. So this one is called Desert Tea. And then next to the Desert Tea over here, there's one called Parfionka. So these were just planted a year ago, and they're already 6 feet tall. So beautiful trees. They're gonna lose their leaves soon. So I also planted things behind them that would continue the privacy hedge. So there's a lemon bamboo back here. If you kind of look at the culms, these are some of my favorite culms of any bamboo. You can see how it's got that yellow and then like a green stripe. And then next to the lemon bamboo, I have a lime bamboo. And that's sort of the opposite, where it's a green culm with a yellow stripe. And you can't really see it very well yet, but once it becomes more mature, you will. And one other thing I wanted to show you here is this silk floss tree. So this is a white silk floss. It has white flowers as opposed to the pink silk floss that we just showed you, which is big already. This is a very rare tree that I don't ever see in nurseries. I found one online. I hope it's what it says it is, because it's from like a Etsy grower, which you never really know. And it's kind of struggled actually. This past winter, the top half of the tree died. I had to cut it at the closest lateral branch. And from there, this summer it's done well. Like, it doesn't mind the heat here, but I think the white variety is somewhat more sensitive to our cold, because last winter, I don't protect my silk floss trees, but this one did die down quite a bit from the cold in the winter. And then right next to this, we have a huge lemon tree. So this is a Lisbon lemon, and it's just full of fruit every year. Like I said earlier in the video, you only need one lemon tree. And if I was to recommend a variety, I would say Lisbon, because it is just amazingly good fruit. Like, before I moved into this house and had this lemon tree, I didn't know lemons could be this good. And we just make lemonade after lemonade, share it with friends and family. My daughters love to have lemonade stands. Like, this tree is just awesome. And lemon trees are easy, and they're gonna make, you know, having this type of tree in your yard feel like it was worth it. You're always gonna use lemons, but you don't need more than one. Just to kind of complete the privacy hedge on the back, there's a pink oleander here. Behind it, there's something called weaver's bamboo. You can't really see it. It's a pretty boring classic bamboo, but it's one that I read grows really well in shade. And I'm right next to these big Aleppo pines. So there's two big Aleppo pines in this area of my yard, and I still wanted some privacy under them, because right next to the trunk, you don't really have a lot of privacy. So I put in that weaver's bamboo, and it's done great. It's been there like 3 years, and it's just like this solid square of privacy. Next to it, I have this kind of struggling Mexicola avocado. During the summer, it doesn't get any sun because behind it is this sea breeze bamboo, and sea breeze is insanely vigorous. I didn't really realize how vigorous before I planted it, and now this avocado tree doesn't get enough sun. But now that it's going to be the fall, winter, spring, the sun is lower in the sky, so this tree will get more sun and will recover again like it always does every year. But this sea breeze bamboo is the biggest, most vigorous bamboo that I have in my yard. So if you're thinking about how do I get like a super fast, huge privacy hedge, I'd say sea breeze is the biggest one that I'd go for. So I hope you enjoyed this tour of my backyard. There's still some small areas of the yard like where I have this plumeria planted that I didn't show you, but you got the gist of it. You definitely got to see all the fruit trees and all of my favorite trees. So if you like this video, please give me that thumbs up. It really helps the YouTube algorithm find this video. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do. We'll keep showing you rare, exotic, and fun trees growing in a harsh environment. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.